Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. The Toronto Police Service and the Toronto Police Association share a common purpose, and that is member safety is our top priority. Our organizations are coming together to share this important message with you today, stressing the severity of this situation. Every year, parking enforcement officers are assaulted while performing their duties. Since last year, we are beginning to see a disturbing trend in the rise of assaults on these members. In 2021, there were 6 assaults on Toronto Police parking enforcement officers. In 2022, it more than doubled to 15. Last year, we saw a troubling amount of assaults with 46 members assaulted. And as of July 18th, 27 parking enforcement officers have been assaulted. In most of these cases, the member was assaulted while they served a parking ticket. This is unacceptable behavior. This has a huge impact on their personal and professional lives. Parking enforcement officers are uniformed civilian members who cover Toronto's 158 neighborhoods, keeping the city's roads and people safe. Not only do they issue parking tickets, last year, parking enforcement officers helped recover more than 1,100 stolen vehicles, facilitated more than 21,000 vehicles being towed, assisted officers with 16 arrests, and provided support to 246 special events. Parking enforcement officers provided operational support through language interpretation, emergency support, crime management, as well as assisting with corporate and local community policing initiatives. They also regulate parking through the application of bylaws, respond to the public and private parking concerns of the community, support special events and demonstrations, and they assist with the safe and orderly flow of traffic, which we know is a priority for our city. I know that some people get frustrated while trying to find parking in the city, but violence is never the answer. Toronto Police Service does not tolerate acts of violence toward our members or any member of the community. One assault on a parking enforcement officer is too many. If a member of the public is charged with assaulting a parking enforcement officer, they should know the consequences, and they are serious. They could be charged with assaulting a peace officer, the same as if they had assaulted any uniformed police officer. These charges can lead to a conviction, imprisonment, fines, a criminal record, and prevent you from traveling or getting a job. To those who would resort to violence over a parking ticket, I encourage you to think twice. Parking enforcement officers are civilian members doing an essential and challenging job for our city. They are committed to our communities and enforcing the city's bylaws, choosing to be of service to our residents and visitors. The Toronto Police Service is committed, and I am committed to ensuring their safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today. As the association representing more than 8,000 members of the Toronto Police Service, including 370 parking enforcement officers, their safety is always a top priority for us. Our members go to work each and every day, keeping the city safe, keeping it moving. They do not deserve to be cursed at, pushed, punched, let alone have to jump out of the way of a moving vehicle. They deserve to go home to their families and feel safe and unscathed. With citywide gridlock, parking enforcement officers help keep the city moving. They're responsible for recovering hundreds of vehicles each year, assisting police officers with arrests, and participating over 100 special events. These officers do far more than serve parking tickets. They deserve the respect of the city and everybody in this city. It is our hope that this campaign today will stop this criminal behavior. It cannot be our parking enforcement officers that are continually targeted for doing their jobs. To risk jail for a $30 parking ticket is beyond anyone's understanding. As a city, we must do better than this. We must demonstrate civility towards each other and towards the members of this city, and also towards the members of the Toronto Police Service. Without them, our streets will be less safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will not be taking questions, but we have parking enforcement officers available for one-on-one interviews after this press conference.
I know just on a technical question, you mentioned that parking enforcement are civilian officers. Can you just explain the difference between what that means to the public in terms of what's a civilian training officer versus?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. And part of what we're trying to do today is create awareness that when you assault a parking enforcement officer, in the legal framework of how we operate, they are civilian members of the Toronto Police, meaning they are not constables, but they are peace officers under the law. The charges that apply to assaulting a member of this organization in uniform performing their duty under the criminal code is assault peace officer. So when a parking enforcement officer is assaulted, the charge is the same as if you had assaulted a police constable driving a police car, responding to calls. So different roles, different legal powers, but under the criminal code, when they are assaulted, it is the same charge and the consequences are serious.
Chief, right now in the city of Toronto, congestion, you could say, is maybe at an all-time high. I mean, there's closures, there's congestion, there's a lot of problems. So drivers seem to maybe have the frustration level at the highest, their views maybe at the lowest. What do you say to people out there who are feeling kind of that frustration every time they get behind the wheel, and maybe that builds up to where things blow up and they assault wherever the members of your force are?
Yeah, listen, I think we can all acknowledge we've experienced congestion in the city. We can all understand that it leads to a sense of frustration. You know, I'm a lifelong resident of this city and I've watched it change over the years, so I totally get the frustration. But let me be very, very clear. The message today is resorting to violence when you're frustrated and taking out violence on our members is unacceptable. It will not be tolerated. So while I appreciate frustration, and we all get that, resorting to violence and risking a criminal record and all the consequences that come to that is simply not acceptable behavior. And quite frankly, it's just not what Torontonians do.
I'm curious, what do you think the leading cause is? Do you think it is the frustration? Do you think it is the fact that maybe people are struggling financially right now, and you know, a $75 ticket a few years ago might not have been the same that it is now? I'm just curious what you think maybe is the cause behind this, because it's pretty dramatic for like this big of an increase.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it speaks to broader issues we deal with as a police organization, responding to the needs of our communities as it relates to community safety. And there's never a singular reason for these things. They tend to be complicated and they tend to be overlapping concerns. And, you know, we have seen a change in polarization in our communities on a number of levels. And I think this is one example where we're seeing people act out and in a way that's inconsistent with the values of our great city.
If I could also just ask, I wonder, just to play devil's advocate, because obviously assault is never the answer, and, but I'm just curious, some of the places where I see a lot of people get tickets, I think many of us have done stories around Cherry Beach, for example. There's that like long road where people always park, it's a $100 ticket, and then you go and you get a ticket on each car, and I've seen people get pretty upset down there because there just isn't a lot of parking options. They're kind of mad, I guess, at the city for even having this sort of a scenario play out. So I'm curious, what do you think maybe the lack of parking availability or the ways in which people are allowed to or not allowed to park at specific locations like Cherry Beach, for example, how much of that is fueling the kind of incidents that we're seeing here?
Well, I don't think I can point at parking on Cherry Beach being the cause of the dramatic rise in assaults. I mean, we're seeing it all over the city. It's not unique to any particular street. And as it relates to a specific area, I'd encourage people to call their local councillor and have that discussion with local councillors on what can be done to alleviate any community concerns regarding parking in a specific neighborhood.
Chief, of course everyone's responsible for their own temper, and that's, talks about us just being humans. Can you talk about de-escalation? Because obviously members of the public see a parking enforcement officer. They're not armed, there's no tasers, and so maybe they feel like it's okay to use fists or whatever it is. Can you talk about the de-escalation training that these parking enforcement officers undergo, and maybe does that need to be boosted up considering the climate and the tensions continue to rise?
No, I think that's a wonderful question, and gives me an opportunity to describe what has happened. We actually last year mandated that type of training for parking enforcement officers on a yearly basis. They do get de-escalation training, they get crisis communication training, occupational health and safety training, and that is now a yearly thing that we very much focus on to ensure our members are equipped to the best of their abilities to cope with whatever confronts them, including aggressive people on the street.
Has there been any serious injuries to any of these parking enforcement officers?
Well, I think I don't want to minimize any injury. I mean, there have been injuries for sure, and it's very concerning with any injury. But, you'll have an opportunity to interview these members on some of their experiences, and they're quite harrowing. They really are quite concerning.
Back to the earlier question, from a city point of view, at City Hall, I know they've made a number of changes. They're trying to improve rules to speed up traffic. So parking is often a conversation there. Is there anything you think the city can do to try to improve the situation, whether it's public education campaigns, better signage, improving parking, improving kind of rules? Like, I know they have a big one now about blocking the box, and that's illegal now. Like, what kind of things can the city do to help you guys out?
Well, I think, I'll say that we are working very collaboratively with all the city departments that have a stake in this conversation. I think the city at large, including the Toronto Police Service, is doing everything we can to help with the congestion and the reasons for the congestion. You've heard the coverage, of course. There's a number of reasons contributing to that congestion, but we work in partnership with our city folks now. We continue to look for innovative opportunities and ways to solve what's causing some of the congestion that we can make an impact on.
Chief, and this is my own personal observation from this morning. I parked illegally to get a coffee. As I'm walking at Yonge and Dundas, I walked past a guy with a handful of needles, walking in front of people, asking if they want to buy a needle. I walked by another guy that was sitting on the curb, injecting himself with a needle. I kept on walking. I saw a guy on an electric bike going speed limit plus through a red light, weaving around. And then I'm looking, I'm probably the guy that's going to get the parking ticket because parking authorities or parking enforcement is a revenue tool for the city as opposed to an enforcement tool. And it's like, isn't justice supposed to be fair? These people shouldn't be allowed to drug deal and me get a parking ticket just because I'm getting a coffee. You can see the frustration there, right?
I can appreciate that, but I think we as a police organization focus on various priorities that concern our city. Today's news conference is about the assaults on these members who don't deserve to be assaulted. That's the bottom line. Stop assaulting our parking enforcement officers. And if you do, let me be clear, there will be very, very serious consequences, and we will do everything we can to hold people accountable when they assault our members.
Can I also ask about the SUV incident? The police cruiser hit an SUV, now the police watchdog's investigating it. We've had witnesses telling us that it looked like the police SUV was pursuing the ATV. Do you have any knowledge on that?
As you know, being a Special Investigations Unit mandate invoked, I won't be commenting on any specifics around that.
Okay, any other questions about the PEOs?
Thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here today.